Hello, everyone. Praise the Lord. I hope by the grace of God, all of you have been doing well, and God has been gracious and God has been faithful to each and every one of us. Uh, I can understand that we have had a long gap since the time we had already started the course. So we are going to continue now as we are trying to get on track. We have already finished the courses with our final years, so we are actually now focusing on our second years and first years. Okay, so now we will be on track and we will be continuing the course and we will soon be finishing the course that we have started. Okay, so today we are going to continue from the place where we had stopped. Okay, so just a quick preview of what we have already done. So basically, before this I have already posted 4 videos on YouTube. Okay, and I have also sent the link to the Google Classroom, and I believe that all of you would have subscribed, all of you would have viewed those videos and also taken notes from those videos. Okay, plus additional, I have also sent notes on 2 chapters. So the background of the Old Testament or Old Testament survey, the subject Old Testament survey or biblical survey 1 has already been completed. So the background part has already been completed, partially in notes and partially through the videos. Okay, so if you have not watched the videos, I would request you to get to your classroom, Google Classroom, and check the links over there. You have the video links over there. There are 4 video links over there. Kindly get to that and view it, take notes from there, because background is very important to any subject. Okay, and then we have also done 2 chapters through notes. Okay, it's archaeological. Those 2 chapters are about archaeology. So we have totally completed 6 chapters, 4 videos, and 2 in the PDF or notes form. Okay, so we have completed 2 units before this. So now we are going to enter into the third unit. Okay, so just before we enter into this third unit, I would like to tell you what we are going to look at. Okay, so this subject, as you have already known or already seen the title of this subject, this is called Bible Survey 1 or Old Testament Survey. Okay, so Old Testament Survey is basically for the BTH and Bible Survey 1 is for the MDiv. Okay, but it is quite similar, so we can have it for both the classes in a similar manner. Okay, so we have to understand that this is a survey course. This is not an in-depth course of the books of the Old Testament books. Okay, so this is not an in-depth study, so do not expect any in-depth study in this particular course. So this will just be a survey. We'll be looking through superficially over all the books of the Old Testament. Okay, so basically after this, into the next levels, when you go to the next levels of your study, you will have some in detail studies of the prophetical books and other books also. Okay, so for this course, we will just be having a survey kind of a study. So let's begin with what we are going to do. So this is the third unit that we are going to start. So we are going to pick up every book and we are going to take a survey on those books. So let's begin. So let me just start sharing the screen so that you can also follow what we are doing. Okay. So just let me go to the slideshow. Yeah. Okay, so you can see here that we are going to begin with our unit 3. The third unit is about the Pentateuch. Okay, the third unit will be talking about the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch, we know it means the first 5 books. Okay, so we'll be talking about that right now, and we'll also be dealing with the book of Genesis in this particular video. Okay, so let's see. So Pentateuch. Okay, so let's talk about Pentateuch first. So what is this Pentateuch? Okay, so Pentateuch is basically the first 5 books. Okay, it is considered to be the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Okay, it is also called Torah in the Hebrew language. Okay, so we'll be coming to the terms in just a while. So let's see first what this is all about. Okay, so Pentateuch is considered to be the first unit of the Old Testament or of the whole Bible, and it actually gives us the background of the whole of the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. Okay, so we can also see that it covers a period. It covers a period from the time of creation till the time of Mosaic era. That means from the time of creation, basically up to the time when Moses is about to die and when the people are going to enter into the promised land. Okay, so we can see that in this section, this Pentateuch section actually begins with a prologue, okay, which is with a prologue, which is chapters 1 to 11 in the book of Genesis. Okay, so we see that there is a unique kind of subject that chapters 1 to 11 deal with. Okay, so we'll not be definitely dealing in particular or in detail over these chapters. Okay, but there is a course on Genesis where we deal with this particular portion of the scripture. So first chapters 1 to 11 is a prologue, and after that we see there is a flourishing of the new civilization. Okay, and then that civilization is drowned in the flood. Okay, and then after that we see that there is again a civilization that comes up after Noah and his family, and then we see gradually the sin again, people start sinning, and then we see the Tower of Babel, which is in chapter 11. Okay, and then after that we see the life story of our patriarchs, okay, from Abraham. Okay, so the story of Abraham starts. Okay, and with the story of Abraham we see the promise of redemption also taking place in the genealogies of our ancestors. Okay, so then we see thus the Pentateuch, as we can see, it can be said to be the story of God's people from the time of the call of Abraham and up to the death of Moses and the people who are just about to enter the promised land with Joshua. Okay, so this is the basically the period about which Pentateuch writes, or about which Pentateuch is all about. Okay, so let's now just look into the term of Pentateuch. What does this Pentateuch mean, or what does it stand for? Okay, so Pentateuch basically covers a period of 600 years from 1900 BC to 1250 BC. Okay, so the term Pentateuch, if you go to see the term Pentateuch comes from a Greek word. Okay, penta, we all know penta is 5. Okay, so Pentateuch basically means 5 scrolls. Okay, 5 scrolls. So they constitute the whole of the laws. Okay, Torah, the whole of the laws, which is Torah. According to the Hebrew scriptures, we understand that in Hebrew language it is called Torah, and in the Greek language it is called Pentateuch, or the 5 scrolls. Okay, so we see that it is Torah, and Torah basically means teachings. Okay, teachings. Okay, so we have to understand that this whole unit, the first 5 books in the Hebrew language, they are known as Torah, which is also known as the law, which means basically teachings. Okay, and this section is in the Greek Septuagint, it is considered to be or called to be Pentateuch. Okay, so this all is actually mentioned in the when we were studying, or in the videos, if you have seen, it has also been mentioned in the background of the Bible. Okay, so we can see, we can just go further on and we can see some more things about this. Some scholars basically prefer to call it Tetratuch. Okay, now what is Tetratuch? Just like penta means 5, tetra means 4. Okay, so some of the scholars basically think that it is suitable to call it as Tetratuch because they do not consider Deuteronomy to be a part of it. As they say that Deuteronomy is completely, it should be considered to be in a different section. According to them, Deuteronomy is, it acts like an introduction. It acts like an introduction to the historical or Deuteronomical historical books, which come as the second section of the Old Testament. Okay, so that is what some of the scholars tell us, that this Pentateuch is not suitable. We should just consider the first 4 books as the first section of the Old Testament, and they call it Tetratuch, and they remove the book of Deuteronomy from this section, and they say that it is basically an introduction to the next section, that is the historical section that begins with the book of Joshua. Okay, so they remove this Deuteronomy from the Pentateuch section and call it Tetratuch. So that is one of the views. And then we see there is another view which says that it should be called Hexateuch. Okay, now just as Pentateuch means 5 scrolls, Tetratuch means 4 scrolls. Now Hexateuch means 6 scrolls. Hexa means 6. So Hexateuch means 6 scrolls. Now why Hexateuch? So some of the scholars who are from the other view, they say that we should include the book of Joshua also. Okay, why the book of Joshua? Because Joshua, when we include Joshua, it completes the whole story, or it completes the whole narrative. So from the time of creation up till the time when the people enter the promised land, they have entered the promised land and they are settled over there. Okay, so Joshua takes the people into the promised land and he settles them over there, and the book of Joshua talks about all these things. Okay, so some scholars say that it should be Pentateuch. Pentateuch is a general understanding, and Pentateuch is widely accepted. Okay, but still some scholars say it should be Tetratuch, four scrolls, and some scholars say it should be Hexatuch. Okay, so this is what basically we talk about the term, as we are talking about the term Pentateuch. So we just saw some things about this. So just now let us look into the authorship part. Okay, so authorship is also very important in the Pentateuch section. For every book, basically, the authors are very important, because if there is, we do not know the author, it becomes difficult for us to understand what the intended meaning of the author may be, because we do not have any background of the author. Okay, but traditionally we have to understand that there are a there are a lot of debates and a lot of controversies about the authorship of Pentateuch. Okay, so there are a lot of views in that. So let's just look at in a short way. Let's just look at it. Okay, so the authorship of Pentateuch has been a topic basically of a lot of concern and a lot of debate among many of the Old Testament scholars for the last 2 centuries. Okay, so it has been a debatable topic. Okay, we'll see why. Okay, so the critical scholars, basically, there are critical scholars. I have also talked about it in the background. Okay, so there are critical scholars also who believe in the source theory, and that is JEDP theory. Okay, and that believe that Pentateuch was basically constructed out of 4 separate documents: J document, E document, D document, and P document. So J is the Jehovah document, E is the Elohim document, D is the Deuteronomy document, and P is the priestly resources document. Okay, so these are the 4 documents, and the critical scholars believe that the Pentateuch, it does not have one author, and they believe that it is constructed, the whole Pentateuch is constructed out of 4 separate document sections. Okay, so combining all of this, Pentateuch has been written. So there is no one author, as according to them. Okay, secondly, they also believe that the background or the story, the narrative style, and the documents, basically, they find that it does not belong to the patriarchal age, but they feel that it belongs to Davidic or the kingly period or exilic times. So for them, according to them, there is no one author. That is, they do not believe that Moses is the author of Pentateuch. Secondly, the reason is that they think that it is of a when it is written, it was written in a style or in a background where it talks about of a later period, not of the patriarchal period. So that is why they reject Mosaic authorship. Okay, so they reject Mosaic authorship. Also, they say that the historic conditions, as we have said just now, the historic conditions do not belong to the patriarchal era, but of the kingly times or monarchical times or the exilic times. Okay, but we have to also understand that the modern scholarship. Okay, so we have to understand that people have been, researching, and people have been excavating, and people have been studying a lot. So the modern scholarship, if we talk about the modern scholarship and the recent archaeology, we see that they stand opposite to the critical scholars. Okay, so they believe that Moses has written Pentateuch. He is a main, basically you can say the main author, but he has taken the material from different sources. That is what is believed today in the modern scholarship. Okay, but traditionally, so if traditionally you are asked that who has written the Pentateuch, so the traditional or the answer you have to write, or you can tell, is traditionally it is believed that Moses is the author of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Okay, so now let us just look at the structure of the Pentateuch. Okay, the structure of the Pentateuch. So let's see, Genesis chapter 1 to 11, it is the prologue. Then we have Genesis 12 to 50, chapter 50. It talks about the patriarchal era, that is from Abraham till Joseph. Then we have Exodus 19 to Numbers 10, that is from Egypt. They are from Egypt to Mount Sinai, their journey from Egypt to Mount Sinai. Then we have Numbers 10 to 21. Okay, so this talks about the wilderness journey. It is approximately, it covers a period of 38 years in the wilderness. Okay, then next we have the last section, that is Numbers 22 to Deuteronomy 34. This talks about the encampment before Canaan. Before they entered into Canaan, they were camped at the just at the or the bottom of Canaan for approximately 1 year, where Moses was with them and he gave them a lot of instructions and he repeated the whole law system. Okay, so that's how we can structure the Pentateuch, or the Pentateuch can be divided into these sections. Okay, so now let us move on to the main themes of the Pentateuch. So there are four main themes that are found in the section of Pentateuch. So the first theme is election, second theme is covenant, the third is law, and the fourth is Exodus. So okay, so election, covenant, law, and Exodus are the main themes of Pentateuch. Okay, so this was something about the Pentateuch that we were seeing. That is the first five books collectively, which is Pentateuch or the Torah section. Okay, now let's jump into the first book of the Bible, or the Pentateuch itself, that is the book of Genesis. Okay, so Genesis is an interesting book, but my apologies, the subject does not cover the whole of the book of Genesis in depth, but we will just take a survey of the book of Genesis. Okay, so let's begin the survey of the book of Genesis. So this book is the first book in the Jewish tradition. Okay, so this is the first book of the Bible. This is the first book of the Old Testament scriptures. Okay, it is named for its first words. Okay, so the name that we have, Genesis, that is a Greek term, but the original, the Hebrew word for it is Bereshit. Okay, Bereshit. It is a Hebrew term. So the book of Genesis is called Bereshit in the Hebrew scriptures. Okay, so why this name? So this name, the meaning of Bereshit is in the beginning. Okay, in the beginning. So as you read the first words of the Genesis, of the book of Genesis, you will see it is written in the beginning God. Okay, so the way the Hebrew people used to keep the names of the book was that they will take the first few words of the book, what is written in the book, and they make that to be the title of the book. So the first few words of the book of Genesis is in the beginning. So that becomes the title of the book. So Bereshit is the title of the book in the Hebrew language, in the Hebrew scriptures. Okay, so the next we'll see it in Greek language. Genesis comes from the Greek language. Okay, so Genesis comes from the Greek language, which means beginning. Okay, so this is the title given to the book of Genesis in Septuagint or LXX, and it is also found in the Latin tradition. Okay, so in the Hebrew tradition, it is called Bereshit. In the Greek and the Latin version or tradition, it is called Genesis. Okay, so what does it mean now? What does this mean? What does this title mean? Or what does this title mean to us as we read the book of Genesis? It means origin, birth, and source. Okay, so we've already seen that Bereshit means in the beginning and Genesis means beginning. Okay, so we can also say that it means origin, birth, or source. So though the book initially talks about the beginnings, but it soon, after the 11th chapter, it soon moves on to tell us about history. Okay, so it gives us narratives of history of the patriarchal era. Okay, so if we see this way, that the whole book about the book, or if we just try to justify the title of the book for the whole book, so we will see that the name Genesis is not so apt, because the book is not only talking about the beginnings, but it is also talking about history. Okay, so only the first 11 chapters are talking about a lot of beginnings. Okay, but we see from the chapter 12 onwards, there is a history of the patriarchs. Okay, so if we try to criticize or critically analyze the topic or the title of the book, it does not stand properly on 100% ground, because it does not only contain, the book does not only contain the beginnings, but it also contains the history of the patriarchs. So on those grounds, yes, we can say that the title is not justified. Okay, but nonetheless, that is traditionally the title, and we are more acquainted with that title, and that's fine to follow. Okay, so let's see what this book holds about. Okay, so when we're talking about the beginnings, so we will see four basic beginnings that the book of Genesis talks about. Okay, so there are four basic beginnings that the book of Genesis talks about. First is the creation. Second, the beginning of new life outside Eden and after the fall, that is chapters 4 and 5. Then we have flood and the new beginning afterwards, that is chapters 6 to 11. And then we have a new start with Abraham, that is from chapters 12 to 50. Okay, so now let's move towards the authorship of the book of Genesis. Okay, so just as we saw about the authorship for Pentateuch, so same thing is applied to the authorship of Genesis also, because Genesis is a part of the book of the section of Pentateuch. Okay, so traditionally, definitely, Moses has been ascribed as the author of the book. Okay, of the book of Genesis. But the more recent trends, if you can understand the more recent trends, the more recent surveys, the more recent researches that have taken place, we can see that there is less emphasis that is based on the traditional views or the traditional historicity, but now it is more focused on the canonical concerns. Okay, so the shift has taken place from the traditional historicity methodology to the canonical concerns now. Okay, so it's simply, what does it mean? It simply means that Moses is the author. Okay, so they do not deny that Moses is the author of Genesis, but what they say is Moses is not the first person to write everything that is found in the book of Genesis, or that is found in the, the whole thing that from time of creation up till the time of Joseph. So there is a long period that Moses talks about in this book of Genesis. So what they're trying to say here is that yes, Moses may be the author of the book of Genesis, but he did not get resources or the source. He did not get information directly from Revelation, but he is not the first person to write these things down. So he is the one who actually gathered the information from various sources, and he compiled them and he wrote the book of Genesis. So there is revelation, there is definitely inspiration, and there is a lot of research that Moses has done to write this book of Genesis. Sorry. So this is basically based on the evidence of author's knowledge. Okay, so we have to understand that who was Moses. Okay, so to understand the authorship, we have to understand who Moses was. Okay, so Moses, basically we know that he lived in Egypt, and in his writings we can basically see all these things that we're going to talk about right now. So we can see the Egyptian language, we can see the archaism in the languages of Genesis, and then we can see the ancient customs that are recorded in the book of Genesis. So we can see that in the Egyptian culture of that time. And we can see that there are parallels. Okay, there are parallel cultures running in that period, and there are similarities among the cultures that Moses is basically talking about. Okay, so these cultures belong to the second millennium BC. Okay, and the systematic researchers basically have told us that the similar culture existed in those periods. So that is how we understand that the research has been done and Moses has written based on those cultural studies and culture. Okay, so we can also find a systematic and purposeful arrangement in the book. Okay, so this could be done only by a person who is educated and well read. Okay, so we have to understand that traditionally, yes, Moses has written, but how did he write? He was not the first person to write everything about everything that is mentioned in the book of Genesis, but he actually gathered information along with the revelation that he received from God, and he wrote the book of Genesis. Okay, so let's move ahead and look into the themes of the book of the themes that are found in the book of Genesis. Okay, so we saw that there are four themes in Pentateuch, so two of which is being covered in the book of Genesis. The election, the first one that it covers is election, and the second that it covers is covenant. Okay, so let's look into the themes. Election. What is election now? So we have to understand election means you're choosing somebody, right? Choosing somebody. So what importance is election over here? Election is very important here because there are few people whom God chose. Okay, few people whom God chose. Definitely, the most important person we see here is Abraham. But just before that, we see in chapter 6 onwards, we see Noah is a person whom God chose. So when we see the genealogy, we'll see some people whom God actually chose. So Noah was one of the individuals whom God chose actually to save the race, the human race, or the mankind. Okay, so he and his family was saved in the boat, and he obeyed God, and he was a righteous person, and he entered into the boat, and he saved mankind. And from him, we see that a new civilization comes out. Okay, so but the main character that we see over here about election is Abraham. Okay, so God chose Abraham. We see that God calls Noah righteous. We see that God spoke about, Enoch and all these people. But for Abraham, God doesn't say anything at the time of his call. Okay, so it's purely because of God's grace and choice that he chooses Abraham based on his foreknowledge. So God's knowledge or foreknowledge is the most important thing that we see in the history. Okay, and how and why God chooses people. So the main aim probably to choose Abraham was to start a new nation. Okay, to start a new nation to follow God fully. Okay, so in those times, you have to understand the nations that were surrounding Abraham. They were not godly people. They did not understand or know God, and they did not understand how to live a good life, how to live a God life pleasing to God, how to live a righteous and just life. Okay, so God chose Abraham. God elected Abraham, and He taught him a lot of things. He taught him a lot of things, and he was obedient towards all those things. And from him, God wanted to create a nation or bring out a nation, bring forth a nation who would teach or who would be, followers of God, and who would be examples or who would model a godly life, and they will be a blessing to everyone or every nation around them. That was the main purpose of choosing or electing Abraham. Okay, so that's what we see in Genesis chapter 18, verses 17 to 19. God calls Abraham his friend and says he chose him so that Abraham may raise his family and his household in ways of the Lord. Now, what is this ways of the Lord? This ways of the Lord is not a religious ritual. It is not a sacrificial system. It is not even prayer. Okay, it is a lifestyle. It is an ethical lifestyle that God wanted Abraham to follow, that God wanted him to teach his children and his household and his family. Okay, so he wanted that his people should be righteous and just. His people should be righteous and just. That was the quality that God was seeking. So God did not choose Abraham to start a religion. He did not choose Abraham to start some religious rituals or sacrificial system or prayer kind of a thing. But he actually chose Abraham, and he wanted him to teach his people to live righteously and to live a just life. That's what God wanted, and so that they may be a blessing to the other nations. That was the basic aim that God chose Abraham and God elected Abraham. So let us see it in a diagram form. God's plan for Abraham and Israel, so that Israel keeps the way means righteousness and justice of the Lord, and so that the fulfillment, that the redemptive purpose may be fulfilled. Okay, but what happened after God chose Abraham? After a lot of generations passed by, we see that the Israelites actually forget. Okay, when they start living this religious life, and they start living this life with laws and everything, with all kinds of rituals and all kinds of sacrificial system and everything, they start taking pride in themselves. Okay, so God's election was not a matter of ethnic pride. The Jewish people started taking pride in themselves and looking down on other people. God wanted them to be a role model. God wanted them to be models or examples of humility, of justice, of righteousness. He wanted them to represent God Himself onto the earth to the other nations. But the problem was that these people started taking pride in their ethnicity. They started taking pride in being Jewish people. They started taking pride in belonging to the Jewish race. Okay? So that became a problem. So God chose Abraham, it was the grace of God and there was a purpose to it. But the people or the descendants of Abraham forgot all those things and forgot their responsibilities, forgot their role, and they actually started taking pride in their ethnicity. Okay, which actually displeased God, and God continuously kept reminding them that it is not because of your race, that or that you were so righteous that I chose you. It's only because of my grace and because I have a plan and because I wanted to redeem the people, because I wanted to have a redeemer brought into the world. That's why I chose one race. Okay, so there is nothing special in the Jewish race, but it is the plan and the purpose of God that God chose this race. Okay, so there is no matter of being proud of the ethnicity that they belonged to, but nonetheless they were proud, and God, we see that God was very upset with them and very angry with them for this cause, for this reason. Okay, so let's move on to the second theme of the book of Genesis. So the second theme of the book of Genesis is covenant. So this is the main theme, actually. This is the main theme of the book of Genesis. So the book mentions three covenants. There are three important covenants that the book of Genesis mentions. It is Adamic covenant, then there is Noahic covenant, and there is Abrahamic covenant. Abrahamic covenant is the most important covenant among all the three covenants. Okay, so it is found in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, and it is then reaffirmed in Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 to 17, and Genesis chapter 18, verses 18 to 19. So, what is this Abrahamic covenant? Basically, this Abrahamic covenant, if you read chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, you will understand that it basically has three parts to it. Okay, so it's a threefold, or it has three parts to the covenant. Okay, the first one is about the land, that God is going to give them a land. Second, that God is going to make them a nation, a great nation. So first is the land, then is nation, and then they will be a blessing to others. Okay, they will be people who are blessed and they will be blessing to others. So these three aspects or these 3 points are found in Abrahamic covenant. Okay, so let's move on and let's look into the outline of Genesis. So we see that the first portion, chapter Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 to Genesis chapter 2 verse 25, we see the creation of the world and humanity. Then we have Genesis chapter 3 verses 1 to 7, chapter 7 verse 24, we have fall of Adam and Eve and the curse of the world. And then we see chapter 8 verse 1 to chapter 11 verse 32, that is renewal of the earth and humanity. Then we have chapter 12 verse 1 to chapter 25 verse 18. We study here about Abraham. Then we have about Isaac in chapter 25 verse 19 to chapter 28 verse 9. Then about Jacob in chapter 28 verse 10 to chapter 38 verse 43. And then lastly about Joseph from chapter 37 verse 1 to chapter 50 verse 26. So this is basic outline of the book of Genesis. Okay, Genesis basically consists of, if we can divide apart from this outline, if we divide according to the structure or the theme, we can divide it into two parts or two sections. First, Genesis chapter 1 to 11, it talks about the beginnings of human history. Okay, chapters 1 to 11, it talks about beginnings of the human history. It tells us about God's purpose of salvation. Okay, why salvation was needed. So it tells us about that why salvation is needed. So the beginning of mankind and the purpose, that is why salvation is needed. The second part, Genesis chapter 12 to 50, it talks about the beginnings of Israel or the Jewish community. Okay, the beginnings of Israel. It tells us about the primacy of faith, how faith began, and about the individual response, like how the faith began and how people individually responded to this faith, okay, to this purpose of God. Okay, so that is, we can say that these two are the sections that form the book of Genesis. Then we have a section of genealogies. So there are a lot of genealogies found in the book of Genesis. So why genealogies are important? Okay, so genealogies basically have dual purpose, or they have two purposes. First purpose, that it stresses on unity of mankind in sin and failure. Okay, that mankind together, all of the mankind sinned. Okay, so when there is sin, it's upon all the mankind, and failure is of all the mankind. So there is, it basically stresses that all the mankind is sinful and it has failed. Secondly, we see that it stresses on that God is gracious to all and God cares for all. Okay, so all these people or all these genealogies that are mentioned, it simply means that they are under God's umbrella of grace and care. Okay, so they have sinned, there are unity in sin, and there is unity in basically how God keeps them under the umbrella of his grace and care. Okay, so the first section, as we can see in chapters 1 to 11, raises a lot of doubts, a lot of problems, like creation, flood, antiquity of man, and these have been questioned and challenged by a lot of scientists. Okay, so science has many times challenged the Bible, basically on the first 11 chapters, and after doing this they say that science disapproves the Bible. So Bible, basically all, among all the books of the Bible, Genesis chapters 1 to 11 is the most critically analyzed portion by the scientists and the science world. Okay, so let us look at three such problems that the book of Genesis faces. Okay, so the first problem is the problem of creation. Okay, the first problem is the problem of creation. So there are five basic problems found in the concept of creation or the creation theory. Okay, so let's look into all these five by name and maybe a little bit of explanation. So the relationship between Genesis 1 and 2. Okay, so the first problem of the creation theory, the first problem of the problem, as we can see here, is Genesis, relationship between Genesis 1 and 2. Okay, so many scholars basically say that Genesis 1 talks about creation, Genesis 2 also talks about creation. So probably it is repeated. Okay, so but we have to understand the way that Hebrew writers wrote their scriptures, or Hebrew writers wrote any kind of literature. Okay, so what they used to do is right in the beginning they will write a summary of the whole thing that they are going to write further on. So what they will do is, it'll be just like an introduction. Okay, it means right in the beginning, for some portion they will just write what, in a summary form, in a gist form, that what you're going to find in the further sections of the book. Okay, so Genesis 1 is basically talking about the creation of the whole universe. Okay, and then it narrows down into the creation of mankind. Okay, the relational thing between mankind and God. Okay, so the chapter 1 is basically talking about creation of the whole universe, and then chapter 2 is basically talking about creation of mankind personally and how relationally he dealt with them. Okay, so these both are not repetition, it is two different things. Basically, chapter 1 is considered to be the summary, and then followed by that we have the more emphasis being placed on the creation of mankind. So it is not a repetitive account that some scholars talk about. So that is one of the problems that we see. Second problem is Genesis 1 and science. So creation becomes a problem, that how creation was done. So we have to understand that Bible is not written from a science perspective. Bible is not written from a science point of view. So it does not give us details about how it happened. Okay, but it simply says God said and it happened. Okay, so there are a lot of creations in how many days, questions like how many days, was it 7 days, was it actually 7 days, or was it actually 24 days, 24 hours days, or how could it happen in 7 days, because it takes a long time to create the seas, the salt in the sea, the mountains to reach their heights, the land, the metals, the minerals, and everything. It takes a long time. Okay, so how can it happen in 7 days of 24 hours? So there is a lot of question that science asks, but we have to understand that Bible is not a scientific book. Its purpose is different, and Genesis 1 is basically talking about God. Okay, and it tries to show the grandness of God. It tries to show the majesty of God. It tries to show a creator God. Okay, a God who has the power to create. So its focus is not on the creation, its focus is on God. Okay, but science asks some questions, irrelevant questions, which are actually not found in the chapter 1 of Genesis. So it cannot be answered because it is not found in that. So there is a controversy between science and Genesis 1. Okay. Then we have evolution. Man came from monkey animals. Okay. So Darwin theory. Again, creation is God made everything. God made monkeys also. God made human beings also. God made every kind of animal and their species. But science, according to evolution, Darwin says that we came, evolved from animals. Okay, so there is a conflict between both the theories, and evolution theory basically has been obsolete now, and it has been, uh, you know, uh, it has been actually warned off because of a lot of loopholes in this theory. Okay, so but still it is being taught in the schools. The next is the fourth one is the meaning of the day. Okay, so the problem comes with whether it is 24-hour day or whether it is a period. The problem here is in the term that is being used. The term is yom, that is used for day, and the same term yom is used for period also in Hebrew language. So the problem comes there, that whether it is a day or it is a period. Okay, so we have to understand that yom, the word that is used, is quite confusing over there because it is also used in the Bible for day, and it is also used in the Bible for a period. Okay, so no one knows what it basically stands for. So there are views that it may be a day, it may be 24 hours day, or it may be a period. Okay, so that is again a conflict or problem of creation. Then we have Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Does it indicate the reversion of chaos? So we can see in this, basically, in a short form, we can say that Genesis 1, it starts with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, and the verse 2 goes on to say, now the earth was empty and void. Okay, so some scholars, they think that this is a gap theory. Some scholars say that Lucifer was thrown down after creation, and because of that the whole earth was, destroyed, and that's what verse 2 is talking about. So there is a view like that, but there is again a biblical counter on that the earth was empty and void. That means it was an incomplete process. The creation was just starting, it has not yet started, and the creation was starting, so the earth was in the raw form. That is why it was empty and void. Okay, it was not destroyed. It doesn't mean destroyed. The words that are mentioned over there, it does not mean destroyed, but it simply means empty and void, on which the work has to be done. Okay, so these are the 5 problems of the creation account. So this is the first problem of that we see in the book of Genesis, that is a problem of creation. The second problem that we see in the book of Genesis is the flood. Okay, the flood theory. This is also one of the most controversial topics and debated topics by the biblical scholars. Now, why is flood a topic of debate? So there are 2 views found in the flood theory. So the first view is the traditional view, that is universal flood theory, and the second one is local flood theory. Okay, so what is the traditional universal flood theory? Traditional or the universal flood theory simply means that the whole earth was underwater. So traditionally, it is believed that the whole universe, I would not say universe, basically universe is for the earth, right, in this top point here. So it is the whole earth was underwater. That means the flood, God sent the flood on the whole earth. Okay, whole earth was underwater. But the local flood theory states that only that this account that is mentioned in chapter 6, 7, 8, 9 onwards about the flood, we see that they are talking about from the eyewitness point of view. Okay, eyewitness point of view. That means if Noah is witnessing this thing, so it simply means that from where Noah is watching, everything around him is underwater. Okay, so what Noah is seeing, that is accounted over here. So that does not necessarily mean that the whole earth was underwater. Probably the only region that Noah was living in, the Mesopotamian region, was underwater, and the other parts were not underwater. Okay, so that is a conflicting theory that we have over here. So there are 2 theories: the traditional view, where it says that the whole earth was underwater, the whole earth was flooded by the water, And the second theory is that it was only a local flood. That means that only the region that Noah was living in, it was flooded. That is the Mesopotamian and the little bit surrounding regions were flooded by the water. The whole earth was not necessarily underwater. So this is the second problem, that is the flood. The first one is the problem of creation. Second is the problem of the flood. The third problem. The third problem is the antiquity of man. That means existence of man, pre-existence of man. So antiquity of man, whether man, as mentioned in Genesis 4, can be traced back with reasonable confidence to the Paleolithic age. That is, that is the end of the Ice Age, that is around 8000 BC. But we see that the paleontologists claim that there are traces found of Homo sapiens in that time. Okay, so that is Homo sapiens means mankind. Okay, and we see that mankind was, according to them, mankind was there and they lived in the Paleolithic age. Okay, so there, that is what they talk about. And the modern science, through the knowledge of DNA studies, also shows that antiquity of man is closer to the biblical narratives. Okay, so when they are trying to find about mankind in the earlier days, in the initial days, so it is they are actually saying that it is quite a lot similar to what the Bible talks about mankind and how they lived. Okay, so that is what the science speculations are also talking about. The modern science is also talking about. Okay, so the book of Genesis is the part of God's inspired word. So we have to understand there are a lot of, we just now saw that a lot of problems in the book of Genesis, but nonetheless, it is inspired word of God. Okay, all scriptures are inspired. So this is an inspired word of God. And we believe that if science also tries to research everything with the genuine heart of finding the truth, they will understand and realize the truth of the Bible and the truth of whatever is mentioned in the Bible in the book of Genesis. Okay, so this is all on the class of Pentateuch and the chapter of Genesis. Okay, so we'll meet again on the next few books of the Bible very soon. Take care. God bless you all.